Welcome to 50 Years of Her Story, a podcast from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy Alumni Association. I am your host, Nicolle Bogden, class of 2012. This series honors the women who helped shape the Coast Guard Academy over the past 50 years, the pioneers who opened doors, challenged expectations, and fought to create opportunities for the generations that followed. In this episode, I am joined by Commander Erin Palmer, Coast Guard Academy class of 2009. Erin grew up in western Pennsylvania, nowhere near open water, and with no family ties to service academies. A strong ASVAB score and a nudge from her brother led her to the Coast Guard Academy, where she found her fit as a government major and rugby player. In the 17 years since, Erin's career has carried her from cutter life in Key West to a graduate program in healthcare administration, and ultimately to the center of two of the most closely watched emergency responses in recent Coast Guard history. Erin's story is one of decisiveness under pressure, care for the people she leads, and the discipline to keep showing up. This is Erin's Her Story. Hi, Erin. Welcome to 50 Years of Her Story. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Nicolle. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you today about your academy experience, your time in the Coast Guard, specifically about your involvement with the Scott Key Bridge and the DC plane helicopter incident, where I know you were involved with both of those in the response capacity. And then also a little surprise about your food blog.
Can't wait.
I want to go back to the beginning. How did you even find out about the Coast Guard Academy, why you decided to apply, and that whole entering experience for you?
Yeah, so I didn't know really anything about the Coast Guard. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. There's no bodies of water nearby. After I took the ASVAB, I had scored a good enough score that I had some interest from some of the services. And my brother actually encouraged me to look at some of the service academies. So I started there and I looked at both the Coast Guard Academy and the Air Force Academy, and ultimately ended up deciding on the Coast Guard Academy just because the mission really spoke to me, and decided to go with it. The free education was very appealing to me, but the mission was the biggest motivator for me, and I'm still excited to say that that's the reason that I've stayed so long.
Were any family members ever in the military or gone to a service academy, or were you going in blind to swab summer and what that whole experience would be like?
Yeah, I had a couple of family members who were in the Army. My grandfather and then an uncle were in the Army. So a little bit of military background, but definitely none of the academies. I was the first to go to one of those from my family.
I'm sure they were so proud of you for choosing to do that. I know my parents were like, woohoo, one college tuition.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then your time at the academy, how was that for you? Sports, academics, what was your major?
I was a government major. So I did the international track. I had initially really hoped to end up in the DEA or FBI after getting out of the Coast Guard, but here I am almost 17 years later, still sticking with the Coast Guard and no intention of jumping ship and going over to DEA or FBI. But aside from the academics, I did rugby as a sport. I initially started in basketball actually as a freshman, and I'm 5'2", so that did not go very well for me. It was a very different environment than what I had experienced in high school as a short player. But rugby is really where I found my fit and absolutely love the sport.
Aw, I remember rugby being such a tight-knit group of girls at the academy when I was there.
Definitely. Yeah, it was not a D1 sport, or I guess varsity sport is what we called it. So at the time it was kind of, we would go over to Stonington and practice on the field there, and we had to fight really hard to ever get to play on board at the academy, but it was a great experience.
Were you originally intending to just do a 5 and dive or stay for a short period of time?
Yeah, I didn't have a really long-term plan with the Coast Guard. Honestly, I kind of just saw the academy as, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I know I'll be in the Coast Guard, and I really didn't have any intentions about whether I would stay or whether I wouldn't stay. So I just kind of played it by ear, and it worked out that I have stayed this long.
Were there significant mentors or people that kept you in, or was it job after job, just really enjoying those jobs?
Yeah, ultimately it came down to the mission. Obviously, there's great people everywhere that you go in the Coast Guard. That's one of the best parts about it. But the mission that I've been able to do during my time has really been the thing that's resonated with me and kept me around.
So, speaking of missions, talk us through some of your jobs, what you did upon graduation, and then today.
Sure. So after graduation, I went down to Key West for a couple of years. I was a deck watch officer on board Coast Guard Cutter Thetis. It was a very interesting adjustment to go from being a cadet to being a junior officer. It was very rewarding, but also extremely busy. As you know, right, as a JO, you get slammed with a ton of things and you really have to adjust to that. So we did a counter drug and migrant interdiction operations primarily down in Coast Guard Southeast District. And then from there, I went actually to the command center and started off on the search and rescue side, shifted over to the law enforcement side, and then eventually was a command duty officer. So that was a really formative time for me, I think, as an officer, where I just learned a ton about not just the Coast Guard, but about interacting with senior leaders, learning how to brief, learning how to do a whole lot of different things that were kind of outside of what I did on the cutter. So after D7 Command Center, I went out to San Francisco, to the sector there in the enforcement division, kind of still, doing a lot of the same missions within the law enforcement realm. And then after that, I took a hard left turn at grad school and went to the program at Army Baylor down in San Antonio for healthcare administration. So that was a really interesting pivot.
How did you even find out about that program? Because I feel like I've heard a couple people going, but it's
Yeah.
never really something I was tracking or aware of
Mm-hmm.
really till it was like past the point of me even going ever. Not that I would have done something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get queasy with broken bones and all of that. So not my fit. But
Right.
these special, cool, awesome programs, how did you learn about it?
So it's definitely, like you said, it's a niche program that a lot of people don't know about, but there was another JO at the sector that had gone through the program and kept telling me, you need to apply to this one. You need to apply to this one. It's really good. So I ended up applying and getting in, having had zero healthcare experience in my career or lifetime. And it was very challenging, but a very cool program.
Great. And so after the grad school program, you had to do, I'm guessing, a payback tour
Yeah.
related to it?
Yeah. So I did I call it my first payback tour because I kind of ended up doing two in a
Okay.
row. But so the first one was I was the Coast Guard liaison to TRICARE. So I stayed in San Antonio for 2 years in that liaison job, working with the Defense Health Agency. And then I took a second payback essentially at base NCR as the Hiswell department. So there I had oversight of the clinic at headquarters, as well as the clinic at the yard, as well as our work-life programs.
So I literally didn't even know we had a liaison to TRICARE as a
Yeah,
job. What does that look like?
I didn't know it either. That was a surprise to me that that was going to be a job that I could get coming out of there. But it was, you do a lot of stuff within policy, TRICARE policy, working with the health benefits advisors on both the Coast Guard side and on the side with, at the time it was Humana, so
Yep.
the contracted insurance provider.
Cool. And did you like it, or was it kind of just something you got through?
So what I liked about that job is that I had a lot of freedom to kind of make it what I wanted it to be. And
Mhm.
so I was very interested in doing some different projects for the Coast Guard.
That sounds so awesome. So for somebody who might be considering this program, is it more like a hands-on healthcare type job, or is it more like data behind a computer doing work? Like what skills would somebody need to be good at to succeed?
So, as I learned, you don't have to have any healthcare experience going into it. It certainly helps. All of my classmates during that program were doctors, pharmacists, physical therapists, nurses. So I walked into there as one out of 50 people who had zero experience in the field. So it's an uphill battle to try and get yourself to kind of the same level set with your classmates, but it's something that you can definitely learn if you work at it. But
Yeah.
afterwards, it's helpful to be able to talk the talk. I remember one of my classes early on was, I don't remember what the class was, but it was a nurse who was teaching it from the army. And he kept saying MI. And I was like, what is an MI? I don't know. Just call it what it is. And it was a heart attack. A myocardial infarction is a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm sitting there just kind of looking around like, what does that mean? And eventually you pick up on the different language and what the things mean. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to get hands on in terms of actually doing healthcare. You're there to be the administrator and do all the executive type of functions associated with it.
Gotcha. Did it make you love Grey's Anatomy more or less?
I love Grey's Anatomy, but I fully recognize how unrealistic it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
That's so
Pit
funny.
is the most realistic medical show
You're
or
like
drama that's
the
out there.
fourth person to recommend The Pit. I have
Yeah.
not watched it yet, but
Yeah.
it's on my list. Okay, so now I'll move it
Is
up
it?
the list. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. I
Okay,
like it.
awesome. All right, so you finish up at grad school, you do your payback with TRICARE, you go to Hiswall, and then what?
And then I went to Sector Maryland, NCR. So I really wanted to stay in the area after being assigned to base NCR. So I managed to find a spot as the enforcement chief at Sector Maryland, NCR, and spent 2 years there. And it was busy.
Yeah. So
It
we'll
was
get
very
into
busy.
that a little bit. While you're at NCR, two kind of big events happened that were nationwide news. Do you want to do a quick brief on both of those and kind of your involvement in them?
Sure. So the first one, of course, was the Key Bridge collapse. That was March of 2024. So for that response, I was the operations section chief for the first few days, and then shifted over to a branch director for a little bit longer. And then, I kind of separated from the incident response and went back to the sector to do regular sector work after that. But about a year later, then we had the DCA plane crash. So the Army Black Hawk helicopter that collided with the American Airlines flight. And again, I was the operations section chief for that.
So with two major events back to back, you're in the room making decisions. Were these your first real world emergencies that you were responding to, or had you been part of an ICS team before that?
This was my first real world emergency. So I had been part of many planned events, especially from the law enforcement side, working national special security events. I had been a part of several of those. And then I had really no experience with real life crisis. So this was my first, and I went pretty big for it.
Yeah, you did. Where were you when you first heard about the Key Bridge incident?
I was in bed.
You were in
So,
bed. Okay.
yeah, it happened at a little after midnight, and I got the call around 1:30 that morning.
Okay.
And I'll never forget, it was the deputy sector commander that called me because at the time I was the acting response department head because ours was on leave. So she called me and she said, "Erin, are you awake?" And so that's never how she starts her phone calls.
Okay.
I working search and rescue with her, that was never something that she would say to me. So I was like, "Yep, I'm awake."
Yeah.
And
Now I
she
am.
said, "Yeah, I'm definitely awake now."
Yeah.
So, and she said, "This is the big one," and kind of gave me the information. So it was, at the time, we didn't know how bad it was. We
Okay.
just knew that a ship had collided with the bridge. There was some kind of damage to the bridge. We got reports that there were parts of the bridge in the water, but I had no idea that the whole bridge was gone.
Well, you didn't know at the time that it had
No,
really, okay.
not at all. And so I hurried up and got ready, went into the sector, and then I didn't know that the bridge had collapsed until I got into the command center. The CDO turned his computer around and said, "Watch this." And it was the surveillance video of the ship hitting and then the bridge collapsing like a bunch of popsicle sticks. And it
Yeah.
was just so astonishing and unthinkable.
Wow. So what time were you like up and out of bed and on your way in within the hour? And now it's like
Yeah.
3 a.m.?
Yeah, it was about 3 a.m. at the time.
Okay. Wow. And you stand up the IMT, I'm assuming, at that point?
Yeah, so we kind of huddled up at the sector first, and our deputy, she really kind of, we did a full brief on what we knew at the time, and she basically assigned people like, you go here, you go here. Erin, you're going to go and be the ops section chief at this place. We didn't fully know where the ICP was at the time. There was 2 different spots, and so it was a little confusing, but eventually I got over there and walked into the room, and I was one of 3 Coast Guard personnel walking into the room at the time, and it was, you know, all first responders types in the room, and they just kind of turned and looked like, good, you guys are finally here. So, and then a couple minutes after that, they handed me a microphone, and I had to give our brief on where the Coast Guard was at and what we were doing and the status of the port, and went from there.
I'm just like processing because I can't imagine like within a few hours you go from sleeping soundly to running an operation with, lost lives, huge bridge, on the news, people wanting answers, and not really having any, I'm assuming, at the time. Did you feel prepared for this with your experience in the Coast Guard leading you up to this moment? What were you feeling? Were you just like locked in getting it done?
I felt a lot of adrenaline,
Okay.
truly a ton of adrenaline that first morning. And you get that kind of like shaky feeling in your chest whenever you get the adrenaline rush. But for me, it turned into just go, go, go. It was one thing after another. And, I didn't walk into the incident command post and automatically I was the operations section chief. It was, you know, kind of getting a feel for where each agency was, who had what out on the water. And it took us a couple hours probably to kind of get to that point of, you know, okay, everybody's doing their own thing that they would normally do in an
Mhm.
emergency. And now we kind of consolidate and start working together. So
Yeah.
that's definitely, any incident that you're working, that's kind of the storming phase, I guess, where you
Right.
get everybody in the room, everybody's doing their own job, and then eventually you get it organized.
Yeah. It's chaotic. Really, the first, I would say, day or two, even just figuring out what needs to be done. What decisions were you making early on for that?
So yeah, so in terms of decisions that I was making, it was really, our command center was still heavily involved. We were not to the point yet where we had handed off the full incident to the IMT. The biggest decisions that I was making at that point were, people were coming up to me and asking me questions, asking me for things from the Coast Guard. Communications were extremely challenging early on because, everybody's on a phone call, everybody's talking to somebody, and so being able to connect with people through that chaos was really challenging. And so ultimately I had to make decisions and then hope that I could back brief them. But the bigger decisions that I was making was really, running around to different parts in the room and saying, okay, here's the guy that I work with in my normal day-to-day work who runs dive operations. So, hey Mike, I need you to run dive operations. And he was already doing it. It's really just like, okay, I'm officially saying that you're doing this and I'm
Hmm.
going to put your name on this org chart. And then, building out that org chart trying to figure out what functions we needed, and being able to focus on that while also getting 1,000 different injects continuously was challenging.
So originally your incident commanders were not at the incident command post with you guys. You were having to call or brief, which does make the decision making hard, right? When they're not just
Right.
next to you and you can turn and be like, hey, this is happening. But really cool that you felt you had the autonomy and the trust to then make those decisions and feel like you would be supported in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's some degree of an incident of that scale where you're forced to do that. But, luckily I had the trust of my command, and, they pointed at me and sent me over there for a reason, and it worked out.
So at the time of this recording, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the bridge collapse. You're still in the area. Do you ever think about your involvement in the event, especially with the news articles of they finally finished the demolition and they're starting the building? I mean, there's probably reminders and triggers for you.
For sure. I follow along with the rebuild efforts. Obviously I have a connection to it, and I'm very interested in what they're doing. But actually, in preparation for this interview, I watched one of the documentaries again last night. There was a couple of documentaries that were made about it. Both of them came out around the 1-year anniversary of the event, and it's I had a relatively small role in the overall response to the Key Bridge collapse. I was the ops section chief really for only a few days. And then, hundreds of responders came in afterwards, and they did the really hard work, honestly, for 11 weeks. So I got to be there for what is the most, I guess you could say, exciting part of it, where it's absolute chaos and we're just trying to figure out where to go. And the people that came in afterwards had the really, really challenging task of actually removing the bridge. And I mean, the amount of smart people in the room to figure out that engineering problem is just amazing. So, a lot of people came in, they did tons of hard work that wasn't necessarily as exciting. It was probably a real grind and a lot of long hours and long days. But they did it safely, and they did it in 11 weeks, which is truly amazing. So I just wanted to say hats off to them, the work that they did. Again, my role overall was very small, but glad to be a part of the response.
Yeah. Wow. Now that you've had time to reflect on the incident and think about your response and what you did and the Coast Guard in general, were there things that you looked back on from your career and you were like, oh, that makes sense on why we did it that way, or that makes sense of why they taught us that?
I think so. I will say the ICS training that we go through that feels kind of monotonous and like a bit of a slog. And, when you're at one of these ICS exercises and somebody hits you with an inject at the time where you're like, I just need a minute to be able to get this one task done, and then I'll take care of this, I promise. Like,
Yeah.
those injects are so real.
Yeah.
So definitely the training helps prepare you for that, but also just, for me, it was kind of the, I guess, pinnacle of, or culmination of all of the training and experiences that I had had throughout my career, kind of all coming together at the right time for me.
Thank you to our alumni community for your continued engagement. You are what keep this community strong and thriving, especially our members. Membership in your alumni association matters. It empowers connections between our alumni and the Academy to develop thriving and enduring relationships. It supports state-of-the-art and margin of excellence enhancements for the Corps of Cadets. And membership also comes with some pretty cool benefits, like access to professional development and certifications, unique connection opportunities to grow your network, discounts and savings when welcoming back the whole family for homecoming, and so much more. Your membership even supports projects like this podcast. So stay connected, stay up to date, and ensure that your ties to the Long Blue Line remain strong. Become a member today at cgaalumni.org/1887.
And then about a year later, same thing. Where were you when you heard about the collision, the plane collision?
I was on the couch watching TV. It was, I think, 9 o'clock at night.
Oh.
And again, the same deputy sector commander called me. And this time it was, Erin, are you headed down to JBAB, which is Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, which is where Station Washington is? I was like, no, why?
Yeah.
Like,
You're like, I'm watching my show.
Yeah, go ahead and come on down here. We got it. And so, again, she gave me the brief on what was going on. Again, we didn't fully know what the situation was. So, of course, I headed on down. And then, the interesting thing about that one was the sector had just come off of doing 3 national special security events in January to
Wow.
include the inauguration just 8 days before.
Mm-hmm.
So we were tired, physically and mentally tired, but we were also very well practiced at that point in standing up an INT, and actually we still had equipment on site. So it was like, hey, fire up the lights, let's get the boat ramp lit up and warmers going. So it worked a little bit in our favor, but there's still some level of chaos, even for a well-practiced team.
Yeah, right. Were there similarities or differences to these two incidents? Both large scale, both catastrophic, lives lost. What was similar in how you responded and what was different for these?
Yeah, the way that I responded was, pretty similar in terms of just getting there, trying to figure out what was happening, getting things set up, identifying the right players in the room. It was different because the jurisdictions where this happened were really challenging. So you have essentially where this crash happened, the confluence of the DC, Maryland, and Virginia state lines all in one spot, exactly where this plane crash was. And so that presented some challenges for us. But for me personally, I took some lessons from the bridge response and went ahead with those. So one of the things that I personally felt like I could have done better at the bridge was calling people in, getting the right people right beside me. Like I said, we had that challenging communication with people who weren't physically there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, immediately called. Our bosun was on leave, but called him like, hey, I need you. My lieutenant got him in. And so we all got in the same room and made it happen. Luckily, we were, like I said, very well practiced at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately and unfortunately, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you had to call your bosun in off leave. You're calling your lieutenant. This is the second incident they're working within a year that's big and heavy with a lot of things that have happened. What were you doing to help take care of some of your people that are working these?
Yeah. So one of my jobs at the sector as the enforcement chief was I was also the station manager. And I know that different sectors handle that responsibility differently, but of course we were calling in all of our stations to help respond to this incident because we knew this was going to go for a long time. We needed as many people on the water as possible to try and search for survivors. We knew based off of the initial crews that were out there how tough of a situation it was on scene. Even at the station, which was right there adjacent to the crash site, you could smell the jet fuel. It was overwhelming. And the boat crews that were coming in off the water were struggling very clearly. So it was really I made a point of prepping those crews that were going out, especially we had a lot of the officers in charge coming in along with their crews. So just prepping them for what they were going to be going into. I also had, at one point, needed to put a liaison over with essentially where they were collecting the remains so that we could get a clear line of communication about how many folks were still missing. And so there was a lot of deliberate communication on my part, making sure that the person that I assigned over there was going to be okay with what they were about to see. Just a lot of checking in with folks. We also had a chaplain. We had 2 chaplains, as well as the work-life supervisor, who is a social worker, who were there with us on site and kind of doing that immediate debriefs with folks to make sure that people were okay and had what they needed. Right.
And I just think like some of those men and women at the station are young, like
Very.
18, 19, fresh
Yep.
out of boot camp, like to be hit with something like this. That's a lot going on.
For sure.
But I can imagine for a lot of them, probably a reason why they joined the Coast Guard.
A lot of people join the Coast Guard to do search and rescue, and the scale and magnitude of this kind of event, is something that is really tough in the moment and honestly afterwards too, but it's what we're here for. It's
Yeah.
what we want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. Honestly, I feel like we don't often get like an inside look of what's happening at the start of an incident, and nice to share like that as much as we prepare, it's still a little chaotic, but we still prepare enough and in a way to where we can get the job done and make it successful, or whatever the right word is for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say it's successful, right? We, just from a boat force's perspective, right? We essentially, the river was still covered in ice. And
I
so
didn't know that.
there was a lot of real-time risk management happening because this was a mission that we had to do. And so those crews were literally breaking ice from the
Wow.
bow of the boat. And those 29s are not rated for
No,
operating
they're
in
not.
ice.
Wow.
But they were, they were innovative. They did what they had to do to get out there and try and save people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you go back to being enforcement chief. Is the rest of your tour uneventful?
Mostly. So this was just a year ago today. Well, a week ago. This was a year.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was, luckily we were able to kind of get back to doing sector business for a little while. We had yet another national special security event before I left. So plenty more opportunities to work with the interagency partners and the whole IMT. But other than that, no, it was, we went back to normal work, which included a couple of air shows as well. So yeah, and I ended up PCSing later that summer in July.
And where are you now?
So now I am the Coast Guard liaison to SAPRO, which is the Sexual Assault Prevention Response Office within the Department of War. So in that job, I work with a really awesome team, and we work policy, we work congressional inquiries. My job specifically is with the Director's Action Group, and so really whatever we're needed to do is what we do.
So this is like, it doesn't seem like it's in the enforcement track. Is this job one you put in for because of your experience with his wall, or was it just something that looked interesting?
Yeah, it was an interesting job. It was also an opportunity for me to take a knee after having a couple of really challenging jobs. So, and luckily that has paid off for me. But also, yeah, my background with his will and the work life side specifically translated well for me, and some of that experience that I can bring to the table.
Yourself as a leader before the Key Bridge and yourself as a leader now, what are some big differences?
Honestly, I don't think that there are big differences.
Okay.
I think
great.
the biggest thing that those incidents did for me was really sharpen my skills and reinforce the need to be decisive, especially in the face of uncertainty. And, like I said, I don't think it's a huge change.
Yeah. I think that's a testament to the the type of leader you are, and you've always been practicing what you preach, essentially, which I think is amazing and awesome.
Yeah.
Lastly, I want to talk about a hobby, I guess we'll call it. I'm a very artistic person myself, and I feel like sometimes it's hard to express that artistic side of me. And I found ways, but you have what I'll call a food blog, and I was definitely checking it out on Instagram, and it's a beautiful page, and I want you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started a food blog in 2013 whenever I was at D7 and I had a bunch of time off whenever nobody else had time off. And so I really needed a hobby, and I got really into healthy eating and fitness at the time, and so I just wanted to have a spot where I could put all of that stuff and share it with people. And I started my blog at that point, and it's called Peanut Butter and Fitness.
I love
And
it.
it's been going strong now for 12 years, going on 13 years. And yeah, so I'm on social media. I've got a website. You can follow me, Peanut Butter and Fitness.
I'll link it below.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, the focus is definitely the healthier side of eating, but also meal prep. Those are my
And
biggest things.
so what's like a day-to-day, like how do you be a food blogger and Instagrammer influencer? Like, I want all the details. Tell me.
Oof. There's way more social media time than I would like there to be honest. There's a lot of times where I'm like, I want to put the phone away and not even think about this, but you have to keep up with the engagement. And for me, the real passion is the photography side of it.
Okay.
I know that everybody loves reels and videos, but I just really love still photography of food. But of course you have to adapt and give the people what they want, so to speak.
Yeah. They want the reels. No, your photos are
Always
gorgeous.
video.
Like, they're so beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing. But I was watching the reels. I am a reel fan, but I will appreciate the still photos of food as well. That's
It's
so
funny
awesome.
because with AI, people will be like, "Oh, this is AI," especially with still photos, because if you take a good photo, they're like, "That's got to be fake." So I've gotten some of those comments. I'm like, "Is that a compliment?"
Yeah, I mean, I think so, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
no way a computer had to do this, and you're like, actually, my own
Right.
two hands.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so awesome. Erin, I feel like we kind of covered a lot of things today. I wanted to leave our listeners with a little bit of advice from you, specifically the women at the Academy now, who are thinking about their career. Some are probably thinking they're going to do 5 years and leave, maybe some other food bloggers, but just some advice to them about things that you've learned from your experience that might help them through the start of their career.
Sure. I think one of the pieces of advice that I have heard and that I think holds a lot of water is don't be afraid to get uncomfortable. Go out, put yourself out there, learn new things. There's a lot to be said for picking up different qualifications that maybe are not things that you're thrilled about, but are ultimately going to make you a better officer and a better leader. And so, whether it's qualifications, whether it's leadership skills, get out there and push yourself to grow in those spaces.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your experience. Hopefully this isn't the last time we chat. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Nicolle.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who helped make another person's journey possible. As part of 50 Years of Her Story, we're inviting alumni to share a moment of gratitude, a chance to thank the classmates, mentors, instructors, coaches, family members, and friends whose support made a lasting difference. Here's this episode's moment of gratitude.
Hi, I'm Janie Clark Thomas of the Coast Guard Academy class of 1992, and I would like to give a shout out to Vic and Bonnie Butch, who were the parents of one of my classmates, Mike Butch, and somehow on one weekend, I came over there in a limo van or, I don't know, the backseat of your car, and you adopted me for 4 years. Breakfast brownies for the kids, working the Little League snack bar, Frito pies, I don't know, whatever adventure, big old huge pots of spaghetti, watching movies on the floor, sleeping in the basement with whoever happened to be crashing there as well. It was literally glorious. So thank you for creating that space for us. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for holding me when I cried through many, many efforts of the Academy. Thank you for being there in the major moments of my life for the past almost 4 decades. So you are exceptional. You are my second family. You're my second mom, Bonnie. And you made a difference in my life. So I never would have made it through that place without you. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 50 Years of Her Story. Erin's story is a reminder that leadership often isn't forged in a single dramatic moment. It's built through years of ordinary jobs done well, so that when the big call comes in the middle of the night, you're ready to answer it. As we reflect on 50 years of women at the Coast Guard Academy, stories like Erin's show us what legacy looks like today, carried forward by the people willing to walk into the room and take charge when it matters most. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and share it with someone who would appreciate these stories. I'm Nicolle Bogden. Thank you for listening.